Okay, now we'll turn it over to Mr. Claude Dupuis, who is going to be demonstrating at AAW in Raleigh this year
In June, yep.
on June 4th through 7th. Okay. Claude, take it away.
So, yeah, this is a practice run for the demo I'll be doing in Raleigh. And it's titled, I think it's titled Vases and Boxes. So you're probably wondering, so I see a vase, but what's this deal about boxes, right? So I'm going to start by showing this. I got a drawing. So everything starts with a drawing. But first, I'll just show you a little bit more about this piece. So obviously, looking at it, it's a vase. And, you turn these vases in two pieces. And in this one, I decided to thread these two pieces together. So this is a threaded joint that when you thread it down and lock it in and line up the joints, you wouldn't know. And I can't even tell until I turn it where the joint is. So you unthread it and lift it off. So I've got it so I've got a little floor in here. I'm going to call it a floor. This is your threaded part so that you could put dried flowers in here and not bottom out. So it would have something for the flowers to rest on. Dried flowers, obviously. Not going to fill it with water. But inside, I got little boxes on the inside. So, and these are also threaded. There's 3 boxes. So this top box, it's got
Where you put your mother-in-law?
you could, I guess, if you wanted to. But again, these are threaded. So I've got a threaded cover so that I use this to lift the boxes in and out of the vase. So that's threaded. You ever make something and pick it up a couple of years later and say, how did I make that? And that's what I did with this one. I went, I don't remember how I made this. So it's going to be a little bit of trial and error. There's a lot of detail just in this cover. So there was as much work in these boxes as there was the vase. So there was quite a bit of work. I previously turned a vase where I wanted to do something interior, but they're speculative, so I didn't want to put the time into it and not knowing whether or not I could sell it. And this one, I decided to go ahead and do it. So a lot of detail in this cover alone. A lot of detail on the inside. I don't know if you can see that on the screen there, but there's some detail on the cover and on the back side of that cover. But again, these are threaded. So there are threads here, threads in there. Again, a lot of detail on the inside. And the boxes are all a little bit different size. Again, another threaded box with some fancy detail on the bottom.
This will be next month's challenge. Right?
Next month's challenge. So there are your 3 boxes with a cover.
Do you thread after you're done the pieces, or how do you get the threads to line up?
How do you get the threads to line up?
After you
The segments to line up.
So that's a great question. You're talking about these 2 pieces to line up.
any.
Well, these don't
line up.
there's nothing there to line up. But on this exterior one, the vase, it is critical that they line up once it's threaded tight. So I think what I did, and I don't remember exactly, but that was a great question.
What's the pitch on those?
Yeah, they're the 16th inch. So what I did on this one to get it to line up so that the bricks lined up, right? So this won't be obvious, but you might see it in the camera. I don't know. It's a little, there it is. So this outside piece, or the threaded piece, is actually an insert. So this insert was glued in that holds this floor. So the floor is not glued; it's just set in a groove. This insert, and this has got a spider on it. Get out of here. So the insert was dry fitted. So I screwed the insert in. Let me see if I can say this right. Yeah, I have an insert there too. And what I did is I screwed it all the way in and then glued the insert when the bricks lined up. Being careful not to glue the two halves together. It's like, uh-oh. So that's how I got it to line up, by screwing it all the way until it was tight, and then insert it and put a little bit of glue, and it was done deal. So that's how I got them to line up. But on the boxes, there was nothing that needed to be aligned. So there was really not that tricky. So if doing segmented work, it really starts with a drawing. I was hoping to get this on the screen, but we're going to try to show you some of the detail on the drawing. So it all starts out with a drawing. You know, you're turning a bowl. It's really designing on the fly. When you're doing segmented work, you need to lay out the drawing and figure out every single ring, every single angle. You can see the boxes on the interior drawn in, so I knew exactly what the diameter needed to be, and you know where the covers and the threading was going to have to be.
That's beautiful in itself. You should frame it and put it on the wall.
Absolutely could. Right there. Yeah, good question. There's all kinds of software out there to do a drawing. You know, this is a 2D drawing. You can get 3D drawings with the software and stuff. And I tried one. Don't remember if I had to pay for it. It was a free one. Don't remember. But it was a little clumsy to use. And I went back to hand drawing them. For a couple of reasons. One is you need a full-size drawing. You can't do a scale drawing and work off of that. You really need a full-scale drawing. So how do you draw it on a computer and then print it full scale? You know, how do I print this drawing full scale? I'm sure you go to a printing place, I'm sure you could get it printed.
Send me the file.
Yeah. So for that reason, I hand draw them. It seems to work out great on graph paper. You know, I can mimic the profile from one side to the other by using graph paper. It helps you to line up everything so it looks right. So once you have a drawing, it's a matter of construction, right? So how do I build this thing? So I want to show the process. But every ring. So what's a ring? So this might be a segmented ring, right? As these are segmented rings. So each ring has its own diameter. So you got to use it's got to be pretty accurate. I'm using it by the thousandths of an inch using calipers. So every segment is exactly the same length, cut at exactly the right angle. This is a good example. Now I'm spitting on it. I'll have to pass this around, minus a spit. And this is a good example of what can go wrong. So you're not going to be able to see this on the camera, but I'll pass it around. And if Brian wants to zoom in on it, you can see this segment, the black segment, ebony, this one is a lot smaller than that one. And that's because the ring wasn't centered when I put it on the lathe. So it was off-centered, and it makes one bigger than the other. So when you're trying to get this, what's called a brick lay, when you're trying to get the bricks to line up, they got to be perfectly centered on the axis of the lathe, or they won't be the same width. So this segment's a lot bigger than the opposite end segment, and the bricks won't line up. So being the smart guy that I am, I figured, well, I'll just correct it on the next ring. So I laid another ring on top of this one and thought I could make a correction, and I just made it worse. So this was glued on a vase, and I ended up cutting it off and redoing what was a lot of work. There's a lot of pieces on this segment, all for naught. So I'll pass this around. You'll be able to see when you handle this that.
So those small pieces of ebony, what are you cutting them on in your shop?
Good question. I'm using, back then I was using and still use a chop saw. I'm using a chop saw. You could use a sled on a table saw. I did start out with a table saw early on. Didn't have a cutoff, drop-off angle on my insert for the table saw. They were just falling on the table. And I reached over to grab one of the small segments, and there's a little bit of tear out on the wood from the saw. Well, that little fuzz, the blade kind of caught that little fuzz and kicked it back. Just as I was reaching into the blade, I was like a half inch away from grabbing the thing and touching the blade. And I went, I don't like this. And I went to the chop saw. And what I'm doing on the chop saw is I'm creating a new bed every time I start a new project and make my cut, my angle cut. So I've got zero clearance and I'm getting much less tear out. Obviously, I'm using a sharp blade. And so I'll have a stop block on this opposite end of the segment that I'm cutting. And I have a little Allen wrench with a handle on it that I hold the piece down. So this is on this side. Now I'm cutting left-handed. So I'm holding it down with this little hold down tool that I made with an Allen wrench, so that it doesn't kick back, because I'm locked between the blade and a stop. So this piece is going to want to kick out. Usually it's on the upstroke. It catches this thing and wants to kick it out on the upstroke. And my fingers are way away. I didn't bring this my little hold down, but it's about the length of this tool. And so I'm holding it back here, and my fingers are way away from the blade. So I can cut small pieces like the piece that's going around. Some of those pieces are pretty small. And just the wind of the blade just makes the piece fly off into no man's land. So I'm able to hold it down with that little Allen wrench and not want to lose the piece, or my fingers are protected. And when the blade comes back up, you got the guard right there. So chop saw works pretty good. But it's pretty accurate chop saw. I haven't used it for construction. It is dead nuts square. Which is pretty important. I also use a setup block like this. This is the very reason. This is for 10 pieces, which is I don't remember how many pieces that is, how many segments going around a ring. But I'm going to demonstrate something that's 10 pieces. So this is my setup block to get my angle, which is 18 degrees. So think about a segment. Think about a segment in segment like this. So I'm going to build another box similar to that looks like this. So this is 10 segments going around. So think about this angle times, so if there's 10 segments, there's a cut on each side. So that's 20 chances it can go wrong, or is it 40? So it multiplies by 40. This angle is off by 1/1000th of an inch times 40. So the accuracy's got to be pretty good. So the chances are of my getting it 100% correct the very first time are pretty slim. But I'll set up my saw with this jig and make a segment and test fit it and make a tiny little adjustment as I need to. And I can get it in a couple tries, usually. By that I mean I've got a good fit right off the saw. So I used to sand every segment to get them exactly the same length and exactly the same angle at a exact 90 degrees. So when it comes to segmented work, you're really doing a lot of woodworking. So you got to be a pretty good woodworker in accuracy and cutting and setting it, making the material. You rough out all the material at the same time. So you got to prep all the material in one shot.
So you just said when you first started, you were sanding them to get them to fit, but you don't have to do that anymore?
I don't. It's just one more step that I don't really need. If I can get a good fit right off the saw, why not? So a lot of times when I'm picking up a segment, sometimes the blade will vibrate a little coming out of a cut, and you won't notice it until you pick it up and look at it and going, oh, or you'll test fit something and there's a little gap, but just on one side. It's because sometimes the blade will vibrate for whatever reason it is, and you don't get a good clean cut. So how do you clean up how do you fit a ring once you got them all cut? How do I change this angle to get a good fit? Can't put it back on the saw. So it's really got to sand it into submission.
Cut the lectures.
And I have set of blocks for every angle. So for 8 pieces, it's 22.5 degrees, and so on and so on. For 24 segments, I've got set of blocks like these to create these angles.
Do the little strips that you're putting in there change the angles at all?
No. So, great question. Thank you. No, I will test fit the segments into a ring without the veneers in between. So it doesn't change the angle, it just changes the diameter of the piece. And I'm using, I'm working with small diameters, small pieces. I do calculate the veneer. Did I in this one? I did deduct 0.055 thousandths of an inch for the veneers off each segment. So I half a veneer off the segment. Did it make a lot of difference on the diameter? Probably not that much. It added a little bit of diameter to it, a little bit of, but yeah, if you, depending on the size veneers, you'll want to calculate that in, yeah.
So if your angle is off a little bit on the chop saw, how do you make that micro adjustment? I mean, is it just usually feeler gauges or something?
You could go the opposite way very easy
Totally.
because it's a micro adjustment.
Times before you get it right.
Yeah, I kind of loosen it and just tap it a little and try it again. But usually can get it pretty close pretty fast. So in segmented work, you really, I didn't bring a list of tools you need, but I use every single tool in my shop. The planer, the jointer, the table saw, the chop saw, the sander. I've got a jet drum sander. I've got an upright 6x24 belt sander. I use that a lot. And this is a sled I made for that upright sander. So I've got this metal, runner on the bottom that fits in the groove of the table. So my table is at a perfect 90 to the sander coming down, and it's got 0 clearance to the sander. Sandpaper's going down this way, right here. And this fence is a perfect 90 to the sander. So it's 90 this way and it's 90 that way, right? So I can get a segment on here, and I've got, for every angle, depending on the number of segments, for every angle, I've got a push stick. So that push stick goes up against this fence. I put a block, a segment on that, and I don't know if Brian can get that on camera. So I will hold it up against this angle and push it up against the sander to take a micro adjustment. So I didn't bring, so let's suppose I've got an opening, I've test fitted them, and I've got an opening on the heel, let's suppose. I want to take a little micro amount off the heel of this segment. So I will lay this on here, and I will put a little shim right there. So it kicks that segment over and takes a little bit off the heel. And I'm talking about maybe putting a little piece of veneer. And I didn't bring one. Well, I did maybe, but I can't find it. So I'll stick a piece of veneer between this little push stick and my fence that kicks the segment over and takes it off the heel of the segment by pushing it into the sander. If I want to take some off the toe, the point, I would put a shim on the backside that would kick the segment that way and take some off the long point. And that's how you make my micro adjustments. So I might have to do that for 2 or 3. I would do that for 2 or 3 segments to get a ring all aligned. I would make a mark on if I want to take it off the heel. I would make a little mark on it, bring it to the sander and take some off, and I would mark the ones that I've done so I don't pick up the same one again.
What grit sandpaper you
Yes.
use?
Great question. I'm using 80 grit. 80 grit.
You just
So,
barely,
I'm sorry?
you're just barely touching it. You got 80 grit on there, right? I mean, you must just
Oh, yeah.
barely skim it.
I'm not taking a lot of wood off.
Yeah.
I am just, you pick it up and you'll see the scratch marks going across the cut. You'll know if you got it all. Just take a look at it real quick. And yes, I'm just touching it. I'm not doing a lot of sanding. Where before, when I first started out with segmented work, I created a stop on this push stick back here that would butt the edge of the plate. And when I ran it up against, with no shim, when I ran it up against the sander, it would stop at that stop block, making every segment exactly the same. I don't do that for any of these anymore. I come right off the saw. They're all exactly the same length off the saw. And I only use this to make an adjustment, especially when you do the first ring, which you haven't got it perfect yet. I'm not going to throw these little segments away and try 5 more times. I'm going to adjust these so that they work. But I'm not going to throw them away. And sometimes it's just micro adjustments on 3 or 4 or 5 pieces until I get it to close.
Do you need to make any allowance for the glue that will be in there?
No, that's minimal. So,
Do you make any allowance for any moisture content in the wood?
no, it might expand a little, but not so much that got to worry about it.
Do you make the veneer or do you buy it? Do you put it,
Another good question. Yes, you could buy it. You can buy different thicknesses. I was buying a lot of veneer in the beginning. Commercially, I don't know, Craft Supply maybe, Woodcraft maybe, but they come in this size sheet. This is where this cardboard comes from. So it's a piece of cardboard and some veneers, and I didn't bring any veneers with me. And when I got to a large diameter ring, originally I was taking the veneer and gluing it on, and they're just cutting away the waste, and I'd have a whole ring. And that's great for commercially bought veneers. What I'm doing with these veneers, well, I shouldn't say recent. I'd make my own veneers because they're a little bit thicker, a little more pronounced. And when you do the math on a diameter, right? Pi times 3.41416, right? Will give you the length. So it takes a circle and stretches it into a dimension. So I take the largest diameter and do the math, and I know exactly what I need for a length stick of wood for these. So I will rough out all my material to something a little bit longer than that because I got to allow for all the cuts. And what I do on the horizontal veneers is I'll glue that veneer on the long stick, and I'm cutting the veneer and the stick at the same time, as opposed to a large sheet that I might glue on. When I first did it, a horizontal one, I actually cut segments of veneers, try to glue those together and line them up. It's impossible. And I thought there's got to be a better way. And gluing the long strip of veneer to the stick, piece of wood, you cut them both at the same time. The joint's in the same place, but so what? You don't see the joint on the veneer.
Have you ever tried to, for your veneer rings, have you ever tried to just build up a thicker ring and either split it on the bandsaw or the lathe?
Certainly, I have done that, and I'm about to do that on something I'm making, yes. Certainly, you could do that. You have to just flatten that ring when you get around to it, but it would save a little bit of time. Yep.
Like when you're making those thin veneers, are you cutting that on the table saw and then sanding them down? I mean, how do you get this thin and not have
Yeah.
everything split up?
Another great question. Thank you. So originally I was running material through the table saw and drum sanding them to the right thickness, which works great, but they're pretty thin. I would run them to the planer until they were too small for the planer. Get some loss there. That's pretty tricky. And then I was putting them through the drum sander, which is tedious because drum sanders you can't be rushed with those. You can only take off a little bit at a time. Another pain. 80 grit there too. But more recently, I would run my stock, extra stock, that I'm going to put on a table saw and rip my veneers from, because it's going to be exactly the same thickness as my stock, the veneer I'm going to rip. And I would rip the veneers right off the table saw all at one time. Much more efficient than trying to run them through a drum sander.
So are we looking, on the outside, are we looking at the end grain or the edge grain of the?
You're looking at end grain. But I was concerned with that in the beginning. I thought, well, geez, I'm really looking at end grain. Is that going to show up? But it doesn't.
Huh.
You're looking at face grain on the horizontal, but you're looking at egg grain on the ends because of the way I'm doing it. And I was concerned with that in the beginning, but it really doesn't matter. The veneers are so small, there's no wood movement that I'm concerned about, trying to align the grain. Ideally, when I first started was, you got to keep the grain in alignment. If you're doing a stave construction and the grain's running this way, you got to run it all the way up. So the movement is equal all the way.
I was thinking more of
so-
the finishing stage, not so much the wood movement that's going to be next to nothing.
It's next to nothing, yeah. So no concern with wood movement. But by ripping them off the same stock that you've prepped, the veneers, it's really a done deal. And your veneers is exactly the same height as your stock. So that helps speed things up.
But as you go up the piece, the diameter gets smaller, is the piece count the same, only the pieces are shorter? Or are there fewer pieces, which changes the angle?
Great question. Thank you for that. Yes, it's the same number of pieces in order to get the brick clay to line up. You have to have exactly the same number of pieces all the way through, all the way to the top. So even when I get to these narrow pieces up top, it's the same number of pieces. They get smaller. So if you look at the largest diameter, the size of that segment compared to the size of that segment,
Is that how it's generally done?
yes,
It's always the same?
the count's always the same in order to get the brick alignment. Same. So the count has to be the same. So yeah, the pieces they get smaller than that if you're doing smaller
How
pieces.
many individual pieces are in that?
I used to know, but I don't remember. Too many to count. When you think about there's a lot. When you count all the veneers and so on, what I do. So I had a solid piece on the bottom. Oh, I have a price on it, $47.95. If you're interested,
Take two.
you got it.
No problem, I'll give you that.
So
So you did different size rings as opposed to the same size ring and get the shape by turning.
every ring is specific to the size. Could you make them all the same size? I think Brian would say probably could. Probably could make them all the same size. So I'd have
A lot of ways, but it might be in the efficiency and because then you cut in one size and you.
It's not that hard to change the edge.
Yeah, it's not that hard.
Yeah.
it's not that hard. It's
A
great.
table saw or a chop saw, it's just moving your stop.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
once you get the angle locked in, it doesn't matter how.
So if your length of your segment is a little bit off, you're never going to see that. It's just got to be all the same length. So as long as they're all the same, it doesn't really matter that much on the length. It changes your diameter. So when I made these, because I'm making a box, they're all the same. So every ring is the same. So, I got a bag of segments here. They're all exactly the same. So I'm kind of jumping ahead a little. So let's back it up. Let's back it up to the beginning. So the beginning. So I need a faceplate. Everything's on a faceplate because I have to square off every single ring on this lathe. So it's on and off the lathe for every single segment. And what I've got is a glue block here, and this is screwed onto a chuck, and that'll remain until this is done. So I got this question, I think, at the last demo I did. I forget who it was that asked this question, and how do you flatten this. How do you flatten it to get started? So, and don't make fun of my stand over here that I'm on this platform that I gotta, because I'm short. So, I'm starting a brand new project. I've got a drawing. I've got a faceplate and a glue block. First thing I got to do is flatten this surface. Let's see what that's going to look like. Ooh, I'm up way too high. Ooh, that's all the way down. Yeah, I think I can hit center. So let's see what that looks like. On. Spinning. Spinning. So it's not turning perfectly true. So I've got a straight edge. This is my nifty centering ruler. I show this almost every time. It's a centering ruler. If you don't have one of these, they're great for centering items. So I'm going to put that right there and check for any voids. And it's a little hollow on the center in the middle, but not by much. So I'm going to call that good. What I'm going to do is take a sanding board right there in front of me, and I'm going to run that across the face of this to true it up. So my toe in or toe out, this will tell me it's an 80 grit piece of belt, sanding belt, 80 grit paper. Find the on button, turn that on, get the speed up. And that's turning pretty nice. So, I started out with a jet lathe that was one inch and 8. So I got about a dozen faceplates that are 1 inch and 8, and I've got an adapter to get to the 1 1/4. So now I've got a flat surface to work from. So I want to glue my starting piece. So the starting piece being this bottom piece, typically a segmented vase, whatever you're building, is going to start out with a solid piece on the bottom.
You don't do a floating piece in the bottom.
No?
Diameter probably not necessary.
Yeah, the diameter's not that severe. It's, you can have a little bit of wood movement, but it's not really that concerning. I'm going to turn this a little bit thinner. Like you see on that piece there, it's only about a 1/2 inch. So yeah, there'll be a little bit of wood movement there, but I'm not too concerned about that.
But do you use air dried or kiln dried for that bottom piece?
Everything's kiln dried. Everything's kiln dried. So as opposed to turning a bowl green, well, there's no turning green here. Everything's kiln dried. I have to buy kiln dried lumber. And, it's a good idea to buy the lumber and let it acclimate to your shop. Don't take it off the rack at the lumberyard and start working on it. Probably not a good idea. So some of this stuff has been around my shop for a while. So where do I go from here? So I'm going to take and measure this diameter and find my center. So this measures, with a centering ruler, I can see center right away. It's just a little over 2 inches, the center. Take my trusty little compass and lock it in. The ruler has the little grooves on it. I can lock this point in 0 on 0 and put it over to the 2 mark. Maybe make it a little bit bigger. It's probably there already. So I got a micro adjustment up here. So I can adjust that to where I want it. Somewhere I have a center mark on this. And I think it's right there. So there's my center mark. So even if this one isn't exactly centered, I'm going to turn it centered anyway. So all I did is draw a circle, get that centered. You'll see, or if you were holding this, you would see sanding marks on this blank. I ran it across my 6x48 belt sander, kind of holding it this way. And I can sand my rings in the same way. It's twice as fast as a drum sander. So that's what I did here to flatten this. If I was concerned about the flatness of this, I would use my sanding board. But because I've sanded it flat with 80 grit, I've got, zero daylight between the ruler here, so I'm pretty comfortable with that. So my starting piece, I'm going to CA glue it. And I'm going to use thick CA glue. And I'm going to put several drops of glue. But before I do that, I should check my circle to make sure that's going to work before I actually put glue down, right? My circle's a little big. So maybe I'll draw a second circle, a little smaller. I could probably guess at that fit. And we'll draw something a little smaller. Ooh, why did that move? Do I have a different center here? Let's try that. And
Well, you're gonna turn that around anyway. Why is it important that that?
I am going to turn it around. I just want to get it close. So this is not critical, but it's going to be critical going forward.
Yeah.
So I'm really showing you the process of getting it centered. And it'll become obvious as this progresses why I'm using CA glue. So, and it's gonna really come in handy when it comes to pulling this project off the glue block. And rather than turn it off, I'm going to be able to snap it off because CA glue is pretty brittle.
You're only using a dot, right?
I'm using a dot. So it's that thick stuff and it's not setting up. You don't have to rush this. You can take your time, really. I am going to use some setup. And, when I go to stick this on, I might not get it perfectly centered. But like you just said, it ain't going to matter. So, and I have to kind of like align it before making contact. So probably right about there. And I didn't quite get it centered, but pretty close. I'm about a 1/16 of an inch off. So it won't be true, but I have more wood than I need, so I'm not too worried about it. I know that this starting piece is going to fit the drawing. We should be good, right? Say yes. So what's nice about the CA glue, so yeah, danger zone's right there. So what's nice about the CA glue is you can go right to work. So I'm going to start by making that round. Round, and it'll automatically center, right? Yeah, it's off a little bit. So now I'm going to have to flatten this face before going too much further. Yeah, I didn't quite get it round. Let's take a little more off of that. Using a bowl gouge, 1/2-inch bowl gouge. I don't know why you'd lose anything different. So I'm setting my tool rest so I'm parallel, perpendicular to the axis, parallel with the piece. Kind of came out of the cut a little bit. And I'm a little below center. Bring it up a little. Not quite there yet. It's curling maple, so you can hear the curl. I might do some shear scraping. So this will be the bottom of the interior, the bottom of my piece. I'm not really concerned about the middle of that block, this block. I am concerned about out here. Why is that? What's that? I'm going to turn away some of this. Big tear out there. But I'm heading in the right direction. I've got a little bit of a hollow on the center, which is okay. I really need it. I'm going to set a ring on here that's going to be, out here. So I'm not worried about the center, but I do want to get this tear out of here. So I'm going to have to take some more off, and I'm looking for the on button. And I got wood to waste, so I'm not worried about getting too thin. I can still hear it. That might be enough. Where are we at? Tear out is pretty bad there. That's wicked. Wicked bad. But I'm hoping a little bit of shear scraping might fix that. So if I was holding my tool this way with the cutting edge on the wood, that's a scrape. So I've got the handle down low, so the cutting edge is at an angle. So even though some of you are not ever going to do segmented work, there are techniques that I am doing that maybe would be useful in your work. So I'm looking at my cutting edge, my knife edge, and I'm putting it flat against the piece of wood. So when we do our sharpening class, or sharpening wig stand class, and we look at how a tool should be sharpened, I want that wing to be straight off the tip of the tool for this very purpose, in order to shear scrape.
Claude, do you ever use a square end scraper?
Do I ever use
A square end scraper?
square end scraper? Yes, you could. I have a scraper here that I use for box making. So it's really when I'm sizing the opening of a box, the lid, I will use this square edge scraper. Could you use it on here? I suppose you could. I'm concerned with this figured wood, what kind of a cut I'm going to get with a scraper. So I'd be a little hesitant with that. I mean, I can scrape it. I can scrape it with this gouge just as easy and get a fair cut. And I want to get rid of this middle, and I'm still proud on the outside edges, so I have a gap. I want to get rid of this, and I need to take some more off on the outside. I'll get there eventually. I could go back to a push cut, but because it's so figured, you saw what the push cut did. I don't really care about the center. Center's gonna go away anyways in my finished piece. You could put a ruler against there, and that's actually pretty close. It's pretty important to start off on the on the right foot, so you got to take your time to get it right. And you get close enough, and there's a little hollow right there, but I'm going to sand it into submission. What this straight edge will do with paper on it is it'll true up the piece. And it'll show you your high and low spots. And that little hollow's showing up right there. Right there I got it. There's a little tiny mark there. Not concerned about that. Now I'm good.
It's 80 grit on there too. 80 grit.
Yes, 80 grit. So that's how you flatten your starter piece and your glue block and your starter piece. From there, I want to glue the first ring. So this being the first ring, and when I glue up a ring, I'm using this melamine board because it's easy glue setup. If you've seen my display at the league headquarters, you'll see an aluminum plate on my display, and that's what I usually work off of, an aluminum plate, because it's flat, it's easy glue cleanup. I am going to use a utility knife to cut the masking tape. I'll demonstrate that in a minute. And so the aluminum plate works pretty good for that, but it's not I don't have it to use. What I've done with this glue up, and I'll do a glue up in a minute, I've glued it up with all the veneers in using a clamp and so on. And I've used my 6x48 belt sander stand up by holding it very gingerly to not sand your fingertips off, because it will sand. It's not like a table saw or a chop saw. It won't chop your finger off, but it'll sand it down pretty quick. So I've run this across my belt sander because it's really quick. And, there'll be one side that'll face the table that'll be flusher than the other side. So I'll use that as my starting side, but I will knock down the veneers, which I really didn't do here, because I guess I didn't need to. Don't remember.
Why you use the belt sander instead of drum sander and just run through it?
Drum sander is so slow, and it's not set up. I got to drag it over, hook up the dust collection on it. It's a process where I could run over to my belt sander. It's already got dust control on it. Slap it up against there and get it done in 5 minutes.
And it's gonna work like a plane.
Yeah.
Whatever one side is, the other side is gonna come out absolutely parallel.
On a drum sander, but holding it by hand, not so much.
Right.
But I'm not worried about that because I have to flatten it on the lathe anyway. So I will run it across the sander like this and rotate it a couple of bricks, couple of segments. I'll do it again. No, it's not quite there. I'll rotate a couple of segments and I'll do it again. I usually lose all my fingernails when I do that. So is that good enough? I don't think it is. So in order to check whether it's good enough, whether it's coming off a drum sander or a belt sander, I'm going to do the exact same thing. Drum sander will do a, what was it, a little, what do you call it, a little relief cut? Like a planer will do a nib, or what do you call it? Snipe, thank you. So a drum sander will do the same thing. You won't even be able to see it. So you got to test it. So a good pencil mark going across a segment on each one and running it across I've got a board here that I've glued 80 grit to. That's probably no longer 80 grit. To check it. So I would put it on this board, just kind of run it across the board. And I'll rotate that too. I thought that would hold better. Oh well. So 80 grit, I'm going to do that until these marks go away. I'll know I'm perfectly flat. There's no snipe from something. Almost there. I've got gone there, but it's not perfectly flat. I'll rotate it, because you may be putting pressure more on one side than the other. So I'll keep rotating it. Good way to warm up in your shop, too. The sanding marks, the pencil marks are almost all gone. I have sanding marks, pencil mark there, and there on the opposite corner. So here I've got pencil on the outside corner. Here I got a pencil on the inside corner. So we're not quite there yet. Yeah. I would, in my shop, kind of just blow this off, get any dust off it, but that would be good. Now, this is the part where I think I invented something on getting things centered. What I was doing originally is I was taking some scrap pieces of wood and I was putting it in, jamming it into this opening, and then finding center by doing a crosshatch with a ruler, finding center and using that. What I found was that was tedious. You had to wedge some pieces of wood. Every diameter was different for every ring. So I would take a piece of cardboard that the veneers came with. It's nice, thick cardstock. And I would lay my ring on top of that. And I have a center mark right there. And I would line it up with one of the rings that one of the circles that I've already drawn. And I've used this before. So there's my center. Right? So I have this ring perfectly centered on that cardboard. And I've looked at the ring that I've drawn on there, so it's centered. Now my starting piece, I need to find center for that. So with my trusty little ruler, I just look at the two dimensions on either end, and right away I can see it's in 3 1/4 on both sides. Centering is that quick. So I set my little trusty little compass here, right on 0, and I'm out at 3 1/4. So yeah, let me open that back up. So I've got my 3 1/4, so I've got that diameter. Now back to the cardboard, if I stick my tool on center and I draw a circle, let's do a test fit. So I see pencil on that side, and I got a wicked shadow. Don't see it that side. I see half a pencil mark on either side. Okay, that's how you center a ring. Now what? Now I want to glue that starting ring to this starting piece. I have some little glue blocks. So what's going to happen when I put it in the press is the things want to skate all over the place. So I built the press. My original press is at the league headquarters on display. Whoops. And I asked Brian if I could borrow his. Brian's got a couple of presses over the opposite on that table back there. So he's got the press on the right. He's typically gluing up a ring like I'm going to do, and then putting it in the press to keep it flat. Now, if my angles, if my cut's perfectly 90 and I'm butting 90 to 90, the ring's going to lay pretty flat. So I've never had that issue where I had to put them coming after gluing a ring, having to put it in the press. But that does help to keep the ring flat. especially when you get the larger rings. It does help to keep them flat. So there's another press on the left, similar to what I am trying to do here, kind of the same setup, except it's got that kind of a wide board there going across. What I prefer is something like this, where all I got is this plate to worry about. I want to be able to see my brick alignment, so I can really get a good visual. I've got a number of these discs. They're really just build up pieces to get closer to this. You could also, I started out with trying to use a clamp, so you can reverse one of these ratchet clamps. You can reverse the clamp so that it pushes out. So you could do this and clamp something, but the distance was really tricky to use. I like the part that you could see what you're doing, but this is already plumb, holds it plumb, and it's a little bit easier than trying to manipulate this thing to be centered on your piece. As soon as you start to put pressure on, the thing wants to skate away and go out of center. So this is a little bit better setup to keep it centered. But now I've got this piece that's centered, and I want to keep center. So I'm going to put some little glue blocks on it. 4 glue blocks to be exact. So I'm going to put a glue block on this corner with a drop of CA on the opposite corner, and somewhere in the middle, let's pick this one, drop of CA there, and a drop of CA on the opposite corner. And take a glue block, and we'll give it a little squirt, and I'm going to pin it right up against that piece and hold it for 10 seconds, more or less.
Those glue blocks have to be on the joint?
No, I put it on the joint because that was the widest I had to put a glue block in and have some material. Could I have done the middle of this segment? Yeah, probably could have. But I have more material to work with. You want to be careful not to push any CA glue into your piece, because I don't want to glue that piece to that piece yet. So it's important not to put too much CA glue there, but just enough to get this. What these glue blocks are going to do for me is keep this centered on that, right? And that's all it's doing. Because it gets really slippery when you get all that glue spread on there. But again, if you don't keep it centered, like that little sample I had going around, your bricks are not going to line up. So when it comes to this segmented work, accuracy is key, not just in this stage, but in the material prep. So now I've got my piece that almost glued, lost a little bit of wood there. So but that's going to be on the outside and going to be cut off. So not a problem. Now I'm going to spread some glue. And I'm really just worried about this flat area, not the center. And I'm using, pretty obviously, I'm using Tight Bond Original. I dropped this and this thing is going to pop off the plate. That would be fun. In front of an audience of 150. Thankfully, I won't be doing a demonstration that's being viewed online. So I just got the schedule like a week ago, and some of the demonstrations are online at the same time, and you get $1 per viewer, extra per viewer. And Donna
We'll hook you up.
Donna Banfield said she was online one time. She made an extra $1,000. She must have had 1,000 viewers, right? And a little bit of wood chip there. Wood shaving that fell off my shirt. So there it is, perfectly centered. Gonna bring it over to the press. I might stack up more rings. Sometimes I use the rings on a piece that's So you could glue it up this way with a ring on it like that. So there's a couple ways you can do it, or you can do something like this and come down on it. So maybe center that on there. There's a little bit of play in these vices. So if I were centering this, if this was a concern in this, getting it centered, when you start to push pressure on, it'll kick one way or the other, and I would adjust it at the bottom. So I would push this back and forth until it was centered, and I would keep adding pressure to it. So that's going to set up. That's going to set up. Okay, here's this.
The magic of television.
There's the oven coming out of the oven. So this is one already glued up. Where? So here's that piece glued up. So I knock these little blocks off. And I have to put it back on a lathe to flatten this. And another 1 inch faceplate. That's a pretty heavy one. People say don't use drywall screws. I really don't worry about using drywall screws to attach a faceplate, especially where there's that many holes in the faceplate. And I'm using the coarse thread screws and not the fine thread ones.
The head off of the drywall.
I have. They're pretty brittle, and yes, you could snap a head off, but once they're seated, there's a very small chance that you're going to snap any of these heads off. Yeah, they're in that glue block, and I don't sweat the idea of, these projects are not so large. So obviously I did this project in 2 halves. Once you get that far off center, yeah, you are putting some pressure on the screws and that glue joint. That's CA glue.
Would the pocket hole screw work pretty good?
Does the what?
Pocket hole screw.
Pocket hole screw?
Yeah, it's kind of designed for bottoming out.
Yeah.
You gotta wash the head off.
Yeah, and on the other faceplate, that one, I actually have some of those, what are those structural screws? I forget what they're called.
Yeah. Deck screw?
Well, they're not a deck screw, but they're structurals. The yellow ones, they're made for structural, which is a step up from the drywall screws. So yeah, I would recommend a better screw. So I'm going to do 2 things. That did it again. I think it comes loose a little when I stop it. And that is spinning a little fast. We'll slow it down. Doesn't have to be that fast. If I was Matt Monaco, I would have it up there. If you've seen him turn, oh my God. So here here I've got one of my segmented rings, and thickness does matter, right? So I only want to take enough off to get it flat. I want to take enough off to get it flat. That felt pretty good. How far out are we? Glue showing there. Still a little ways to go. And are we going toe in or toe out? Perfectly flat. So the ruler is perfectly flat across.
So, Claude, how much do you give on tolerance as far as thickness of the ring? So you're gonna do that, so you're gonna take some off. About how much do you have to compensate?
I am going to do it to all of them, so I haven't calculated that into the design, how much I'm going to take off. So it'll vary a project. The longer the project in length, course, the more variation you're gonna have. If I'm doing a yarn bowl like with 5 rings on it, it isn't gonna matter. So don't need to calculate that in.
Just a basic quick question, which is, how crazy do you try to line up the parallel method?
It helps too. I'm not perfectly aligned, but it does help. I'm a little bit towed in, but if you, especially when I get to the scraping, if my tool rest is perfectly in line, it's just one more thing that gets you closer to getting it right. I mean, whether you're turning a bowl or doing something like this, you're flattening the bottom of a bowl, line up your tool rest. It's going to make things a whole lot easier to see. I could do another push cut, maybe. I might even, before I go there. So I am pretty close to flat. Not there all the way yet. I got one brick there that's low. And that's the only brick. Right there. Still got glue on it. So a little bit more.
Does that indicate that they would had a variation in thickness?
Or, how I sanded it on the drum, not the drum sander, but the belt sander. Took a little more off on one edge than the other. So it could be that. I don't know. You actually hear it when I go across it. I can feel the little bounce right there. That felt pretty good.
Matt would like your shavings.
And I see a tiny gap towards the middle, but not all the way across, about half the ruler, which means I am towed out. So I will take some more off. I've got this much showing. I can see natural wood right here from there to the center. This one brick it's got a little shallow right there. Maybe the way it came off the saw. I don't know. So I got to take the time to get that all the way down. So glue joints, pretty important going forward. You can actually still hear that coming across. I didn't quite correct the toed out. Almost. It's the same as it was. And I am smooth all the way. A little suspect right there. The rest looks pretty good. Not a very clean cut there. I will make one more pass, see if I can clean that up. And like that. I will also, and I see a lot of segmenters not do this step, but I true up every ring. And I'm truing up every ring because I'm going to use, not even close, I'm going to use this diameter to center my next ring. And by turning it true now, that diameter is going to be perfectly centered on the axis. No two ways about it. So I can make micro adjustments as I go by centering this ring and the consequent rings to follow. If I keep them all centered, I make micro adjustments as I go if I missed a little. So I doubt that Brian can get this on camera, but if he was to come in a little closer, you could see the tear out on each segment. It's on the starting side as opposed to the back side. So I'm coming across end grain, unsupported end grain, so I'm getting tear out, flat grain or supported grain coming out of that segment. Going into the next segment, it's the same thing. I've got torn grain there, not torn grain because the grain is supported,
It's going downhill.
right? So the grain of the wood is this way. So picture the straws. I'm going actually in this direction. So I'm going right into the end grain. And I'm coming out of the end grain with supported fibers on the opposite side of that segment. So you're always going to get a little bit of tear out. And, you know, good idea to know that.
Why wouldn't you use sandpaper there then?
Why wouldn't I what?
Use sandpaper there then.
Well, I'm not at that point where I'm going to sand it. You know, I'm going to glue on more rings and then turn it true. So I'm way away from sanding.
So it's not really critical that you've got those.
It's not critical at this stage,
Yeah.
but I'm pointing out the problem you'll have when you have a piece all glued up. You're going to get tear out on one half of that segment because you're unsupported grain coming up through. And if this were a finished piece, you know, when I get to a finished piece, I'll shear scrape it to get rid of that torn grain. So again, if this were the finished diameter, I would just shear scrape that prior to sanding. And I didn't get rid of all the torn grain, but I get rid of them. I would just keep going until that end grain was not torn. But you can see the difference. A little bit of torn grain still on this one half of the segment because of the grain direction. So, one more step that will happen on every single ring. A submission. So this, because you're laying a straight edge across the face, it corrects toe in or toe out. It can't do anything other. Just by getting this, it'll make up any difference. And you'll see it as soon as you start sanding, whether you got it close or not. It does take a little while to ramp up. So yeah, I lay the board across this, and you could see I was toed out. I'm taking more off here than, I haven't touched the inside surface of that yet. But this will make any kind of correction. And if I got it close enough or really close with the tools, I would do a little bit less sanding. I probably have my dust collector going right now. So I'll be happy with that. So now I'm perfectly flat and perfectly centered. So next step. And I promise this is the last step that I'm going to demo on this part. Now I've got another ring, my next ring. I'm going to come back to this board and repeat. So I'm going to use the pencil. I'm going to repeat what I've done. I ran this across one face across the belt sander, and I could easily tell which one it is because of the severe scratches. All the marks are gone. I know I'm flat. Okay. I'm back to the cardboard. I want to center this ring on that same piece of cardboard. I've got rings that I've already drawn that I can line this up with, maybe. I'm going to use the outside most ring. No. Yeah, the outside most ring is a good alignment. And it's a little different this way than it is that way. You know, your rings, when you clamp them up, they might not be perfectly round. In theory, they should be. And typically, they're close, but not perfect. So, you know, I'm getting it as close to centered as possible. That is centered on a cardboard ring.
Are you using a band clamp or rubber bands when you glue those together?
Band clamp. Good question. Now I need to know this diameter. So I'm at 3.5. I got centered already. I know it's 3.5 on both sides. So that's the beauty of getting this round and using one of these rulers. I'm there in a heartbeat. So there's my center, and I'm going to make it a little bit larger than a diameter because I am offsetting the compass off the cardboard, and this is raised, and the diameter doesn't always work exactly. So sometimes you got to do it more than once. Let's see how it looks. That's absolutely perfect. So now I have to contend with this being centered on the axis and brick alignment. So how do I do that? So I'm going to use my centering ruler, and I'm going to make a mark, a pencil mark. I'm going to measure the length of this segment, which is, if I look at the ruler on both ends, is 1 1/4 right there. So I've got 1 1/4 on both ends. So there's my center. If I can hold on to my pencil, make a little tick mark, come over to the other one, opposite corner, call it that, 1 1/4 I said it was, and I might have to make an adjustment one way or the other, but they should all be exactly the same, right?
Yeah.
There's 1 1/4 there. In theory, I don't really need 4, but I'm going to make 4 marks, and I don't know which ones I'll actually use, but that'll give me some options. So I'll go 1 1/4 there, make a small adjustment, go to the opposite corner, call it that, 1 1/4 again. Here's my 1 1/4, and I'm going to use my straight edge to make a mark straight across those 2 marks I just made. And I only need to go out to the ring, right? There. So you can see where people say, oh, geez, it takes a lot of patience to do this type of work. And yeah, there's a lot of steps where things do and can go wrong. So now I'm going to do 2 things. And sometimes I will pick a spot or a brick joint and say, this is going to be my point 0. And I will keep centering alternating bricks off this one brick. Why am I doing that? Because I'm going to get at least one face, my photographing face, perfectly lined. My backside maybe not as good. I don't know. That's the theory. So let me show you on the front side. So I'm taking this joint and aligning it with that center mark I just made. So I've got that joint perfectly in line. I've got this joint perfectly in line, as is this one, and as is this one. So I got all 4 aligned. And they're aligned pretty easily because I centered it on the axis. If I were off axis a little, it would show up right away. I would get some alignment and it'd be off somewhere. So now that I've got my point that I want to keep is right here, I got to go back to the glue blocks. So again, I would glue 4 spots. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now I want to preserve this center with these glue blocks. Now you can skip the glue blocks if you wanted to and take a chance. If I've got rings, if I'm gluing up rings that are all the same diameter, you're not going to be able to put a glue block on it. So you're just going to hold it centered, and when you get it on the press, just kind of work until it's centered. All you're worried about is the alignment from there, if they're all the same size. But if the increments are growing like this, pretty easy to get these glue blocks on you. It'll make your life a lot easier. So now I've got 2 things. I've got it centered, and I'm ready to do a glue up. And I really just need something out on this half. Yeah, this ring, the inside of that is only, what, an inch? Inch in off the outside diameter. Oh, I really don't need to go all the way to center with glue. But, you know, I do want to get that outside edge though. So I'm not worried about centering because I got my glue block there. And I've got my little starter spot. Get that back in there. Rotate that a little bit. Get that centered. And that could be right there, I guess. That's a long ways to down, isn't it? Maybe I want to build it up a little. I mean, you could put more rings on there. I didn't calculate that in very good, did I? I need an extra one of those, which I don't have. Get one of those. Get one of those wig stands over. So let's use this. This is. I kind of wanted to pass this around, but it's going to be tied up for a little bit. And this is a sample of how to make a diamond. So now, you know, because the blocks are holding this perfectly centered, all I got to worry about is the brick alignment, which I have my mark right here. And all I got to do is exert pressure and rotate it just a little bit right there. Sometimes just the force of turning this will rotate your piece a little. So double checking it right there. It ain't going anywhere now. Bingo.
And how long do you leave those in the press?
Overnight. Typically, if I'm in a rush, 2 hours. I'll put it back on a lathe after 2 hours. I'll pull it out of the press and go back to the lathe in 2 hours. Not exerting a lot of pressure on the joint, right? Just truing it up on the lathe and going forward.
Are you using the original when you do that, or are you using that other glue that you sometimes use, the quick set?
I have never used a quick set on a...
The tight bond stuff.
I haven't used that on these segments. So on open segment, I don't know if you remember that tight bond glue we were using was a quick set.
Yeah.
And quick and thick, thank you, yeah. And Brian's question is, have I used it on gluing these up? I have not. I think that quick set, that thick and quick, I think it's as brittle as CA glue. And I'm worried that it won't allow for wood movement. The yellow glue does allow for some movement, a tiny bit. And maybe that's just enough to make it so it doesn't break itself with wood movement. I don't know. So I'd be a little suspect on using something that's brittle.
Have you had any of these crack afterward?
No. No. I have not.
Claude, saying you're gonna leave it in the press overnight, how about like hide glue? Is that anything to that? I know it's a little mixing up in that, but.
Yeah, could you use hot glue? You know, why use hot glue when, yeah, the hot glue is pretty instant too. So I suppose you could use it, but it's a whole another skill that you're gonna have to develop. And yeah, you gotta have the right temperature and so on, so on, so on. It's a pain. So it would be a challenge. I just want to demonstrate a ring glue up. So 2, 4, 6, 8, 9, one more, 10 pieces. So if I was home, I would,
So you do a bag for each ring?
I would what?
You do you've pre-cut all these pieces for the rings
Yep,
of a certain size, right?
yep.
So you figure out how many rings of that size you're gonna need to upfront, or do you make them as you go?
No, I make them, I prep all the wood that I need for that project all at the same time. And what I use is the largest diameter will tell me how long that piece of wood's gotta be.
Right.
Just by doing the math, right? 3.1416 times the diameter times, if this were 8 inches, 8 times 3.1416, we'll take that diameter and open it into a straight line. Now I know that dimension, that's a minimum dimension I need to cut these segments out. I will add 2 inches to that to allow for all the cuts. So I prep all my wood at one time. And so I don't know if I answered your question, but
But the segments aren't all the same.
right, I will cut each ring individually.
Right.
So I'll cut all these rings. If I was doing 4 of them, I would cut 4 sets of these rings. These are all the same. So I'm making,
So this bag is 4 rings that are the same size.
so this, yes.
And
This,
then you do the same thing for other sizes. How
So,
many? Yeah.
so that bag of rings is making one of these. And they're all exactly the same, and they all stack one on top of the other with the veneers offset. So this is how I would fit them and glue them up. Somewhere on this table, I've got one of those plumber's straps, you know what you call these? Clamp. And a little ratchet. And so I would put that on there. And tighten it up. And I have one segment. They're not all flush, and it's not an issue per se. So then I would tighten it up and look at my joints, and lo and behold, they're all good. But if they weren't, I would go back to the sander and make it good.
And you've already put the veneers in?
No, the veneers are not in. So I would dry fit it like this. And then when I'm happy with the fit, which I am here, I got this fit right off the saw in 2 tries. So with a setup block, you can really get it close and then tweak it a little. So now I know my fit's good. And if I've made some micro adjustments to 3 or 4 or 5 of these segments, I would want to keep them aligned. I would keep them in the same order. So I would stretch this out and keeping them in the same order that they were fitted in to make sure it would go back the way I had it, right? All right. Cut off a little piece of tape.
That's good intake.
This particular one, this particular one it's a little on the cheap side, but I use it anyway. This 3M tape is, it does work pretty good. It's a little bit thin a little thinner. I don't know why. I think I had, this is Scotch tape.
Well, Scotch tape is thicker.
It's actually made by 3M and is quite a bit thicker than this tape.
Blue tape, blue paint tape?
Blue tape,
1,000.
yeah, not so much blue tape. I would use a masking tape, and I'm a little concerned that it's thin and might break. If this broke halfway around the circle, that might be an issue. So I'm stretching the tape out in a straight line, and I'm going to stick it to the tape with one face that's going to be flush. These segments are not all the exact same thickness because they weren't run at the same time. But I want to make one side flush, and that's going to be on the tape. So I'm going to line it up on the tape with one edge being flush. Now I got to remember I got veneers in there, right? So there's my veneer, and I have a bag of veneers somewhere. So now I will allow for the veneer and gluing this to the tape. So I will stick a piece of veneer on that face. I will take the next one, slide it down the face, and hit the tape flush, and fold it down. Move that veneer over, and repeat.
You'll glue as you go.
So I'm going to stick it down on the tape flush on that side with the spacing for the veneer. Flush there, and the shadow is working tricks with my vision. Because I can't see flush. Right there. And when I turn this over, I want to have it so it's turned over on this face, because I know that all the blocks of wood, bricks, are going to be flush on one side. So, and each step that I'm doing is pretty important to get it as accurate as you can. The more accurate you can be as you go, the less trouble you're going to have.
So the veneer's about a 32nd?
What is it again?
Is it a 32nd of an inch probably, the veneer?
The veneer, I haven't measured it, but it's about exactly that, yeah. And I've played with different thicknesses to see what look nice, and that's the thickness that I came up with. And too thick, it didn't look good. Too thin, it didn't really show up much. So that was a good thickness. So yeah, I'll have all my rings glued up long before I need them.
Right. Now it's just a matter of stacking.
And I have like several for the project I'm bringing. And the pile of them, I had probably 7 or 8 of them, fell on the floor and one of them broke. And it broke because I'm gluing end grain to end grain. Mm-hmm. Not very strong end grain to end grain. What makes a segmented piece strong is the flat grain that you're gluing to, not the end grain. The end grain is really just you're gluing the end grain just to hold it into a ring that you can turn true and flatten until you can get some face grain glue going on. That's what really holds it together.
Yeah, they're somewhat fragile up to that.
Oh, yeah.
So when you're doing the gluing there, do you always do one at a time, or can you multiples and?
You can only do one at a time because I have to flatten every single ring.
Okay, yeah, that makes
I have to put it back on the lathe, get it true, toe in, toe out, and then so that I got a flat surface for the next glue up. So now I am going to trim the tape, masking tape, on one side flush, so that when I roll this into a circle, it doesn't accidentally fall between the bricks. And I'm going to leave this side a little longer. And we're not going to have much time for threading, but we'll talk a little bit about the threading in a minute. So now I'm ready to glue up. So glue, and my favorite putty knife is over at the league headquarters, but I've got another one here. A thin putty knife probably works pretty good. So if I was gluing up a piece, which I've done many times without a veneer, then I only need to put glue on one side of the segment. But because I'm using this veneer in between them, I have to put glue on both sides. So I'll put a dab of glue on each side. But if I was not doing veneers, So yeah. So a drop of glue on each face, similar to that. And then I use the putty knife to smear it across the face. And make sure each face has got enough glue on it. Again, we're actually gluing face grain to end grain, but it's still end grain gluing. There we go. And now I want to place my veneers in one at a time. Flush on one side.
Yes. On the veneer.
And yeah, being quick here is probably paramount. But moving right along, it goes fairly quick. Got to just get it close. And sometimes when you roll this up, it'll want to squeeze out. So I'm going to put it on the tape side, bring that in, and get it so it's tight before folding the tape over. So I'm there. And could you leave it just like that? Just the tape alone makes it about enough pressure. But I'm going to go one step further. And I try to avoid the knuckle on the clamp so that it's not on the long point of one of these. So it's in between the segment. And that's it. And
What do you do about all the squeeze out?
So there's a little bit of squeeze out. I would just let that dry. I'd put that on the edge of a board, and I would just keep going to the next one. And you can glue them up pretty fast, one at a time. And because I'm using this melamine plywood, this washes right off. And I'm ready to go to the next. I would wipe this down, and I'd be gluing up my next one. So I would wipe that down, and I would put the next set of rings down and keep going. So boxes. This is a box I just recently made. So when I held up my original box and looked at it, I went, I don't know how I did that. So I've glued one up and thinking that this might be the way I did it. And to prove that I actually was able to thread it, I actually was able to thread this one. So it is threaded. Like right there is pretty good. And I've got, it's not an insert like I have here, so it's solid wood. And I find that it's a little difficult on the end grain. So I was just talking to Jim Forbes about this end grain. So I got end grain and face grain. So when you hit the end grain,
Chips.
you know, it wants to kick your tool out, your threading tool. And it's hard to keep it steady. If you're on a metal turning lathe, it's rigid. It doesn't kick out because it's rigid, but you're hand holding it. And on the end grain, it wants to kick out when you're threading. So it makes it pretty difficult. So I've tried several different woods. This is Wingay, and I thought Wingay because it's a dense wood, a little bit oily wood, that it would thread okay, and not bad. I did get some threads on there that looked pretty good. I also tried walnut. Again, I was able to get some threads on this. Actually, it's not walnut. I forget the species that Mike gave me, and I don't remember, but it's not walnut, but it's similar to walnut, a little bit harder than walnut.
That is walnut.
Yeah, this is a little bit harder than walnut. And that threaded okay, but I noticed that there's a lot of torn fibers. And I think when I started doing these practice runs, I think it's important to get it sanded smooth, no torn grain on the face before you start threading, because that is going to show up in the thread. So you want to make sure that surface is pretty clean. I tried this, which is hard maple. Again, I tried some CA glue on this one. So you can see the darkness there with some CA glue. The CA glue is brittle, and yeah, it does dull your tool a little bit. I tried Purple Heart. This dulled my tool the instant I touched the wood. It curled over my bow gouge in one pass. So is that a good idea for threading? Probably not. What I did is, on all these pieces, I turned a recess to chuck this up on the lathe to do, of course, these are internal, external threads that are going to become internal. This wood, we had a piece, Jim's got a piece of this same wood. And this is orange wood. I forget what the name of it is, but
Sage orange?
what is it?
Sage orange?
I don't think so. Anybody can identify this.
There's another name for it, though, that's sage orange, but there's another name for it.
Is it Paducah?
Yeah.
It is Paducah. Who said that?
I think it is.
Paducah. Thank you, Rick. That's Paducah. And that threaded okay, actually. I've got some decent threads on here, so Paducah works. And that color stains your shirt and doesn't come out. And another piece of hard maple. So I've got one glued up. What I've done is glued up these small rings, like that one, and stacked 4 of them up. And I've created a recess in the bottom to glue the bottom piece in. And again, that's got a dovetail cut out on the bottom. And, got a little time left. I'll just take it to how far we can get it. Ooh, that's not going to fit. So I've determined the thickness, the wall thickness is going to be 1/4 inch. That's what this is. So 1/4 inch wall thickness, and I've already done that on the outside, and I've chewed up the inside to 1/4 inch, and then I cut a recess and glued this in. And oh, I like that lock. Good design. Good job, Phil. All right. So what am I doing? So I want to get this off the glue block. And I've stuck it on there with CA glue, much like I did in the beginning here. So I don't know how this is going to come apart, but we're going to find out in a second. So I would give this a tiny wrap, probably right, there's really no seam there.
Hold it. Hold it in there.
Yeah. Somebody put their hand underneath it.
Yeah.
All I got to do is catch it. Oh, sorry. Good catch. So I got a little dent there that I can take out, but there is the inside of the box is the bottom ring has been sized all the way to final dimension on the interior, and I went up 1.5 rings so that I don't have to try to get back in there to square off the bottom of the box. So now all I got to do is remount this, and I'm going to use, I think I'll use this dovetail on. So I've got a dovetail recess. I could use, I want to make sure I'm good and tight. There. That'll be turned off eventually on the bottom. I'll jam chuck it, turn that bottom off flat like I did with this one, so it'll look just like that when I'm done. But I'm here now. So I'm going to do 2 things. I want to flatten, I got to flatten the ring just like I did on the other ones. Flatten that ring, so I'll start with that. back to the same process we were doing before. Is it toe in, toe out? It's toed out. In other words, the outside diameter is out further than the inside diameter. So I want to bring that back in. Where's my controls? I got to take more out on the exterior diameter. That might be enough. Perfectly flat, almost. I'm towed out still a little. But my stick's gonna straighten that. So I'll stick my stick on it to get that flat again. So I want to make sure that I can take my box. You can see where the sandpaper didn't hit that inside diameter because I was towed out a little bit. So as soon as you put the straight edge and sandpaper on the face of that, it'll tell you if you're towed in or towed out. Pretty important if you're gluing something else on this. There won't be anything glued to it, but I want to make sure that, I'll stop there. I want to make sure that I want to square this off. What do I mean by that? So I want the wall to be square across or 90 to the face. So, and I'm going to put a straight edge on here to check that. A straight edge or a square, actually. So I'm going to turn the outside first down to the right diameter. Keep looking for the controls and they're right there. Yeah, you can move them around because they're magnetic, right? So I'm close to the diameter. Maybe a little more. So I'm looking up here as I'm turning. I'm looking at this profile to see that I'm making a flat profile. And before I go too far, I want to check it. So I am going to use my little handy dandy little square. And if I put a straight edge across here and a square across here, how am I doing? So pretty close. Pretty close. I'm a little bit wider at the bottom here. So, but I want to be nice and square, and I want to make the interior square parallel to that. So when I start this threading on this outside, I want something that's perfectly square to the axis. And I got some wicked torn grain, wicked. So I'm going to try to make a little bit lighter cuts in hopes that I don't have as much torn grain. But it's inherent to the grain direction that you're going to probably end up with a little. So I am almost at my mark. A little bit lighter cut. Came out of the cut right there. Now I'm going to shear scrape. I know I have torn grain. Pretty badly torn grain. Mostly on one end than the other end of these segments. But we're going to shear scrape it smooth. I can tell that I didn't get this perfectly straight. I got a little tiny hump right in the middle, which is causing me some problems. I didn't do a good job the last time I sharpened it. So rather than bore you with more of that, I'm going to stop there, and it's almost sanding ready. I'm going to check to see that I'm still square, and that looks pretty good. I don't know if you can see that on the camera or not, but
Yeah.
so I'm square across, so I'm pretty happy with that. Now I'm going to turn my attention to the interior. So how do I turn away that interior? You know, probably there are different tools you could use, I guess. Could you use a bowl gouge? Yeah. Making sure you don't skip across the face of that's going to be pretty important because it's going to want to skate across. So your starting cut would have to be like that. Let's try one turn just for the fun of it, just to show you what can go wrong. To show that, hey, I am human. But there's my cut, and my tool rest is a little high. Make sure we're not going to move there or there. I have a hard time teaching that start of that cut. I actually lay the tool edge on the edge prior to making the push. So, and once that cut started, it can't skate across the face of that once your cut started. But to teach that, it's really a little bit tricky on laying that cutting edge on the edge. Now,
Box rest that extends into the box? A box rest that extends into the box.
a box what?
A box rest.
Yeah, they do make one, a tool rest that you can stick into the box. That would be pretty handy to have. Thank you, Gary, for that. So that would be pretty handy. I am getting 0 tear out on the veneers. And I noticed when I was using my scraper that I was getting tear out. So I developed this scraper that is behind me. So it's got a cutting edge and a 90-degree cutting edge on the tip. So it's a great little scraper to get in here, and the bottom of that scraper is hitting. So my tool rest needs to come up for that. But I think I'm going to get some torn grain. So yeah, that's about the height I want to be at, perfectly flat on the tool rest. And yeah, I can't go in, maybe move that tool rest just a little so I can go in a little ways and not come off the edge of the tool rest. Because I got a 90-degree bevel on there, this is great for setting an accurate dimension diameter for a fitted lid. Let's see what that looks like, just for the fun of it. And we're almost out of time, but so that would. But with the scraper, there's no skating across the face. It's pretty dead, and once you start the cut, it's pretty steady. Pretty easy to do. And then I would check the squareness of that cut on the inside. So again, I got to get it down to that bottom piece that's already at the right diameter. But before I get going too far, you got to keep checking that I'm parallel on the inside. So this little ruler, square, again, if you put it there and check I am almost at the right, it's off by a big 1/16. I am narrower at the lip here than I am where I ended. But there's a little lip right there, that's why. So I'm not quite square across.
Do people use like the square carbide tips for those kind of things to go on the inside?
There's lots of tools you could use for this. I mean, I used the bowl gouge when I started. You could use a spindle gouge and probably do the same thing with a spindle gouge. You could roll a spindle gouge in a scraping motion that I've recently seen box makers do. I think it was Steve, the woodturner, did a box recently. And if you follow him on Instagram, the guy's got super talent with a skew. But Steve the woodturner.
Yeah.
And I recently seen him do a box and lay a spindle gouge so that knife edge is you can shear scrape the inside of a box using the knife edge of a spindle gouge. I have not tried it. So we won't do that today. So I'm a little bit wider at the bottom. Could you do? So I am all but flush on the very one I'm trying to match on the bottom here. I'm off by 16th, but am I still going square? If I take off that 16th, I will be square. And that looks to me like it's sandable. So I would sand the inside, outside. And now, if you're doing interior threads, so I'll talk about threading a little bit, but we won't be able to demonstrate that too far because we're out of time. But here's your interior threading tool made by Robert Sorby. So because I was using some odd woods, how do you sharpen one of these, right? You really have to just hone this face, the top face, on either a diamond stone. Diamond stone will work. So I've got two surfaces on this. I don't remember which is which, but you would just, this is how you would sharpen it. You probably wouldn't put a file on these teeth, I don't think. So you would just hone this top edge until you were happy. So you got to do two things when you're threading. You need a relief cut. And I was using a REM tool that Ron was kind enough to make for me. So I don't know if we can catch this on camera. But I need a relief cut. So as you're running your threading across, you need a little relief to bring the tool away. If the tool bottoms out, it rips your thread. So you need a relief cut on the inside face. I don't know if that doesn't show up too good. So you can probably see it better there. So, and we can. So I have never put this on a piece of wood. So I have not tried this to make a relief cut. And obviously it's on the flat, so I moved my tool rest so it wasn't rocking. And, I got to just estimate the length of my thread, and then the relief cut goes, beyond that, right? So I have no idea what's going to happen. I should have brought my REM tool.
Well, that's pretty quick.
So I'm not threading yet. I'm just creating a relief cut.
Okay.
So the relief cut's back here somewhere, and I'm on the bevel of the tool, so the tool rest is too low.
What does the relief cut mean? I mean, what is it?
So as I run,
A notch.
Just give me recess.
It's a clearance, so that way,
So as I'm running this threading tool, as I'm chasing the threads, if the tool bottoms out, it rips your thread. Because this wants to keep threading. So I need a gap there to relieve the tool from
Create a
break.
gap or something so it doesn't keep running.
Yep, so this is gonna, in theory, gonna create my gap, which I've never used before. I am still on the bevel and the cutting edge isn't touching. So I'm still not too high, not high enough. And the height of your threading tool is gonna be important too. So now the top edge, the cutting edge is hitting, and so I'm happy with the height.
So that's not the thread cutting thing there, that's just the.
Just the relief,
Oh, okay.
just the relief.
Hold on.
Not working like I thought it would. But yeah, like any other tool, they don't come out of the box ready to use. So if I use the corner of it, it does cut. So I'm going to call that. So I'm going to do a couple of runs on the thread, but we're out of time. But let me just show you what it might look like. So I want to be something like that. Where's my threading tool? So yeah, this wants to be, I got to be squared off the face. So the height of the tool is probably pretty important. And the speed of the lathe is going to be important. So I got plenty of clearance on the bottom. And I'm thinking that I'm pretty close to center or below center. And I think that'll work. Lathe's got to be at, they recommend between 250 and 300. So I don't know how accurate the reading is going to be, but so we'll just turn it down to, believe it or not, that's 500. So there's 350. And I know Jim just did some practice runs. I'm down to 336 at the lowest speed it goes.
Have to change the belt there.
The belt would make an adjustment for that.
Yeah.
So that's going a little fast, but just for giggles and see if I can make a fool of myself. So two things they recommend is to round that inside edge just a little bit so it doesn't catch that sharp edge. So maybe something like that. So it's a matter of getting this to run across. Probably started on the corner. Kind of, it's going to be this motion. It's actually pretty quick because it's turning fast enough. So you're going to do one thread at a time. And it says you got to be as. Yeah, you got to keep it moving, or you're just trying a true circle. I'm pushing fairly hard. Not so hard, but at each pass, you gotta lay it down pretty firmly. And of course, I don't have my, ooh, that was bad.
Yeah, that's good.
That was bad. So I had pretty good thread started, but that's how you do the interior thread. I would create a bigger relief I'm coming into the wood, so the tip of the tool is running into a wall. So I need to increase that relief if I was going to keep going. On the external threads, all I did was mount a piece of hard maple in that configuration, and I created a recess by mounting this like that, created that dovetail, turned it around, and did my exterior thread on there. So on the exterior, it's much like I was doing the interior. It's clearly, you can see the relief cut right here, so that you can, and they do have YouTube, and the demo on YouTube, you want to be on the exterior threads, you want to be at or below center. And I could see why when I engage the cutter, the angle does matter quite a bit. So it's just a straight cutter. So where's the camera? So it's just a straight cutter. And the movement is exactly the same. It's coming across. So I'm going to bring it across, and I've eased that edge already. Let's see what happens when I spin it. Again, that's as slow as that'll go. So it works the same way. Right there, it's not doing anything. I'm too high off center. So you got to bring it down to where it starts to engage. Like right there. But it's not grabbing quite as much. If you tip the handle up a little, it increases the cut.
You need like an arcing motion? It's kind of an arcing motion when you do that, or straight?
Well, I'm starting the cut. I'm engaging the thread on this far end of the tool and letting it bring over. And if I bring the handle up a little bit more, the teeth are gonna engage a little bit stronger. So you got to get it a good balance. You hear the tut 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 tut. That's end grain coming across. That's making that noise. So short grain, long grain. You can see where the relief cut really comes in handy here. I brought the handle up a little. And that's a pretty good thread, actually.
Does that pull your tool?
It does. If you look at the cut on this, on the threads, they're actually angled.
So they get deeper as they go?
Yeah, and keeps.
It's at an angle, it's
The-
a lead.
It's
It's a lead of 16.
yeah. So these have a lean. These grooves have leaned over. That's what creates your thread. So that's really how it's done. That's actually a pretty decent thread right there. No. It got a little torn grain there, but it's on the end grain. It's on the end grain coming up again. So you can see where your end grain is coming across, and just as you round the top of the end grain, that's where you get some torn grain. You could sand that smooth a little bit, put some wax on there. Video I watched, they did use some paste wax in this last step. Does that help to lubricate the tool a little bit and create a better thread? I don't know.
I had good luck using Mylan's sanding sealer. Soaked that with. I also did one of them with CA glue. Let it soak in before I sprayed it. And another one I did with Mylan's sanding sealer, and that hardened the wood right up.
So yeah, I haven't tried the Mylans. I did do some CA glue on one of these pieces, and it helped a little, but it dulled my tool a little bit. So the CA glue, I've heard other people recommend that, and it does help a little. Let it soak in. You don't use the heavy, the really thin one that soaks in.
Water.
And yeah, that does work. That does help.
Very good.
That's all.
Bud.
That's all I got.
Very good.
Thank you.